Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business from the inside out. And today I'm welcome to the show, Lynn Altman. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's early morning here, Friday, and it's Thursday
I
evening or
know.
Thursday afternoon for you in New York.
It's Thursday afternoon, so I like that you're literally living in the future.
I know.
You can tell me how tomorrow is going to be.
Yeah, it's starting off okay. It's starting off bright. So yeah, I know it's so funny, isn't it? Because you're in the past and then I'm in the future, but right now here we are in the present moment and it's you could tell me what the past is like and we could compare stories, but you're not here yet. So
Exactly.
I always find it kind of funny, but very, very cool that we're able to be able to talk like this as well.
Absolutely.
Well, we've got a bit to unpack here, so I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna introduce you first because you've been quite the entrepreneur, starting your career as an entrepreneur back when you were 25. And I'm not suggesting you're old or anything, Lynn, but you have some great experience, and I love it because here I am, 48, and I thought I had heaps of experience. But then when you're starting to tell me pre-show what you've been up to, I'm like, wow. So let's just start with you started your first company and it was Brandmaker Express and you ran that for 12 years and you had a partner and you started that when you were 25. And I'm curious to know how you became an entrepreneur at 25, but I'll pause, I'll hold that for a second because I wanted to also talk about what you're doing now. And you are the CEO of Brand Now, which is a New York based innovation and branding agency that moves at the speed of culture. Fascinating. I love that you've called out speed here too. You create new products, design and brand platforms for major consumer brands. And you're also the author of Brand It Yourself and a longtime practitioner in CPG, beauty, financial services, and pharma. And you've had Brand Now for 19 years.
Mhm.
When you add up 19 and 12, it's a long time to be an entrepreneur. So you must be very good at what you do. And you will
Well,
have seen over time the various things that have happened. Tell us a bit about your story.
and it's funny too because anytime I start calculating the math, I have to keep counting it going like, has it been that long? So yes, 2007 to 2026 is 19 years.
Wow.
Really just celebrating, going into our 19th year. But it started, I don't know if I was born to be an entrepreneur, but I was never following the path of what other people did.
Mm,
And, in the early days, I don't want to go all the way back to high school, but, even back in high school, I didn't quite fit in and I just wasn't the normal kid. And so luckily I had found an opportunity to leave high school and go to college at the age of 16.
oh,
So
wow.
already I knew my path was going to be different than my peers. Luckily, I found a college that everyone was 16, so, and didn't
How good.
graduate high school. So I kind of found my people. And I
Mm,
think that's actually important that, being a unique person is okay, but you don't ever want to be isolated. So it wasn't finding this college and this having a mentor and having a group of people who I felt like now I belong. I think
yeah.
that's where I really flourished.
Yeah.
But I did graduate from college when I was 20. So I was super young, had a lot ahead of me, didn't know what to do, waitressed for a little bit, and then said, I think I'll move to New York and see what happens. And I did work at a normal job for a year as an assistant in a big publishing firm in New York and said, "This is awful. I don't wanna do
I was
this."
going to say awesome. And then here you go, awful. I'm like, okay.
Well, it was funny because it was like I was making no money. I was seeing how the corporate world worked from the inside, and it was
Mm,
also in the publishing industry, which was a lot of English majors like myself who were looking to almost be the author, but we were working for the authors
mm,
and just watching the trajectory, I just knew it wasn't for me. So I started trying to figure out what was for me. And interestingly, you said like the universe points you, pre-show we were talking about how the universe points you in certain ways. And I think this is something I still do is just like be curious and meet
Yeah.
people and talk to people. And one of the people I reached out to first was my roommate from college's father, who was a new products consultant and said, "What do you do?" And I was friendly with her family, but I went into his office and said, "Well, tell me what you do." And he had introduced me to two of his colleagues. One wouldn't meet with me, and the other said, "Oh, well, let's meet for breakfast." And he was probably about 25 years my senior, if not more. And actually, if I do the math, he was about 40 years my senior. And I met with him and I brought a made up portfolio. I thought he was a big advertising guy and wanted to put my best foot forward. And it turned out that he had the idea of a business and he was kind of looking for someone to help him.
Oh
And
my
I was
goodness.
the person to do it. And so he started taking me, to run a workshop session with him or taking me to a client meeting. And after one or two of those kind of day trips together, I said, "Oh, I'll quit my job. I'll take the leap." And so he and I just ended up starting a business together. There is a kind of funny story, which is that we would make cold calls. That was, this is back in the 90s. So I have cross millennia. And so your job, like the goal was always to get past like the person answering the phone. So we'd wake up early to get through to the voicemail because there was a greater chance that the executive would listen to their own voicemail. And so we would sit at home and cold call. And the first person that said, "Yeah, let's try it," was Pepsi.
Oh my gosh.
And we're like, "Okay, maybe we have something." And then the second client was Merrill Lynch. And I just actually reconnected with that woman like a few months ago. Um, 'Cause she met my parents and was like, "Oh, I know that last name. Do you know Lynn Altman?" But again, like, it just started, you have Pepsi, and then you have Merrill Lynch, and then we had Lipton, and then it just kinda snowballed. We worked with P&G and Nestle, and it just kept going, and so we knew we were onto something.
So what were you doing, Lynn? What was it that you were in Brandmaker Express? Like, when you was it product design? Like, what were you doing for these type of clients? And like, and I'm curious because you just cold calling Pepsi, and you knew you were onto something.
Yeah.
What were you
So we would
actually
call the
selling? Yeah,
so we call
mm,
So my partner had, of course, years more experience than I did, working for consultants and agencies. And our promise was the new products you want. So it was new product ideation in just 10 days. Give us 10 days and we can do it. And it
so
was 10 days plus. It was like 10 days after a few things happened, but that was the hook. We even ran full page New York Times ads with like the new products you want in just 10 days. And so it was always about speed. And it was paired with a price tag that for these big companies, it was pretty low risk to see if it worked or not. Now, what I didn't know is that at the time, I don't think a lot of his contemporaries really believed that this could work, and I was young enough and inexperienced enough to say, "Well, this logic makes sense, let's try it." And it's great. It was creative, and it did make sense that, like, if you gave yourself less time to do something and cut out all of the unnecessary steps and just kept with the steps that really made a difference, that you could get things done faster,
mm,
and that's
so
what we
true.
did.
So true. And were you and your partner at the time, were you coming up with the idea, like the new product ideas as well, or were you bringing in other people to help you with like?
So we had a process, and some elements of those process I still do today. And just for context, what other consultants would and still do is they do a lot of focus group research, a lot
Mm,
of research before they create ideas, trying to talk to consumers to find insights, to find these unmet needs. And part of his philosophy and our philosophy was let's create let's create good ideas and then test them afterwards and see
yeah,
which resonate,
yeah,
because people have
absolutely.
a really hard time. They're much better at reacting than inventing. And so we would still have ideation sessions. We'd run one with the client and one with creative professionals who we thought could respond to stimuli in ways that would break open our thinking. So he and I would spend time thinking about like, where could a new product be? Where could a new ingredient for a beverage? What are the trending ingredients and how do you take that ingredient into a drink, for example? Or what are things that people want? And we'd pose those questions in our ideation sessions. And then we'd get a lot of people kind of giving their first ideas, first reactions. And then we'd go back and say, okay, let's look at what we heard and try to mine the best ideas from that. So it was, quite subjective. But then that's where the research came in and said, did we get it right? Did we find the right products? Which products did people like more? Which, work, which don't work?
Yeah.
So we always leveraged external thinking, but we did it in ways that set up guardrails for them. So it wasn't us just coming into a room and saying, hey guys, what do you think we should?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what's so interesting, 6 degrees of separation, you talked around, like you didn't fit in and then you found your tribe. And I think your vibe attracts your tribe as well. You probably heard that saying, right? And, here you are, kind of then going, well, what do I want to do? And it's funny, I was a mail girl. I started off as a dispatch mail girl, believe it or not, in terms of I did work experience in these big agencies. So I worked for a really big department store here part time when I was at college was TAFE fast. We call it TAFE, such a like, it's just not a great name, TAFE. College sounds so much better. But, interestingly, I went in to come at some of the biggest agencies here in Australia, and I looked around and I did this work experience, and I was like, "No, this is where I'm meant to be." And, yeah, then I ended up going and working in some different agencies and just with no idea of what it all was, but just looking around watching everybody, and then I got into, account management, client experience that way. It's so funny, isn't it, how it kind of, like, you work with all these incredible people and then you put your spin on it. And yeah, I think sometimes when you're naive, or whether it's the word is naive, it's curious, obviously, but I think there's a bit of naivety as well in terms of you don't know what you don't know. So why wouldn't you just give it a go?
Well, and I think that's a part that a lot of people lose as they get older. I still feel like I live in that a lot of the time, even with our work, where we say, well, let's look down this area, let's look
Mm,
down this avenue and see what's there. Or let's reach out. I still reach out to people I don't know, as do you. I know you do. And say, let me see what happens if I meet with this person or talk with this person or ask this question or when we're working on new products, we still, as we approach ideation, we never say, we think this is the idea. We might say, we think there's something in this one area or with this one promise or ingredient or format. But what question would have gotten us to that answer? And let's look further to see
mm.
like what else there is. And there's a little bit of risk taking that's fun and exciting and keeps your mind open. And you don't always find the answer exactly where you're looking, but it just takes you like one step closer and one step in a direction. And
I,
then you kind of find your way after that.
I agree. So you do 12 years at Brandmaker Express, then you finish in that. So then what happens? Like, in terms of do you take any time out? Do you then start brand now straight away? You obviously love what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, after 12 years, if you think about early 20s to like, mid 30s and the same math for my partner, we just, ended up at different parts of our life where I wanted to, grow and expand and see what else, in our career and with a business that I could do. And I think he was like, let's just keep doing everything that we've been doing. And so I think we just came to a little bit of an amicable, change in who we
Yeah.
were at the times of our career. And so and again, I owe so much to him that he gave me a chance and that, that we had such a successful relationship for so long. So in no way is that disparaging to him. And
No.
people, by the way, loved us together because we just were such an odd couple of people to walk into a room together. They didn't always know what to make of us. And
Kind
that
of
was
reminds me
part
of
of
The
our dynamic.
Intern in a way. You know that movie, The Intern, with
Yeah,
Anne
with Rob.
Hathaway and the older, like, well, what's his name? Is it Robert De
I
Niro?
want to say Robert De Niro, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
So that was it was great, but it was time for me, to say like, let's see what else I can do. Because part of also being a leader and being an entrepreneur is like pushing yourself to always change your role and not
Mm,
necessarily reinvent yourself, but evolve who you are. So it was basically, December 31st, Brandmaker Express shuttered. We had on our website, if you want to talk to Joe, call this number, go to this website. If you want to talk to Lynn, call this number, go to this website. I moved out of our office. It was like a business divorce. I moved out of our office around the block to another office space. I brought one person with me essentially and left all the other employees with him. And just started on the phone again. People who had worked with us, it was almost their choice. Like, accounts I had been working on, I tried to nurture those and keep working with them and get new ones. And so then Brand Now was born in 2007. And what Brand Now did differently than Brandmaker Express is that it wasn't always about the process, this 10-day process. What I wanted to do is say, hey, in this 10-day process, there's actually a lot of things we do. Are uncovering strategies, we are ideating, we are developing concepts, and those things can be taken apart, they can be pulled
mm.
together. You don't always have to have the same type of concept. Like let's tailor what we are really, really good at for what a client's need is and not the other way around.
Yeah, I love it. And speed of culture, tell me a little bit about that because obviously you move at the speed of culture. Like, and when you booked in for the pod, actually, you said, and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience when it comes to life leadership and or business, and you said how having less time gives you greater outputs. I couldn't agree more, and especially because my background's advertising communications as well, and there's always
Mhm.
that ongoing argument between us and creative. We need all this time. It's like, do you though? Like, I get the creative process, but the more time you have, like you said before, you're just stalling. You're just putting it to the side and you're actually not getting into it. It's like when you get into flow state and when you get into it, it becomes effortless and all these ideas come at you. Tell us a bit about this speed of culture piece.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like speed and having less time is one benefit that then culture and staying true to culture, and especially because culture is moving so quickly now, that it's become more important than ever. So I'll start with why why I know and believe that having less time gives you greater output. And a lot of it, as you said, is like if you have all the time in the world, it's great if you're daydreaming. It's great if you're contemplating the origins of the universe, but it's not great when for problem solving. And
No.
most creativity that we do is problem solving.
Mm,
And I mean, I say this all the time that people will say, well, you're creative. And I'll say, well, an engineer is creative. A mathematician is creative. They're just
great.
solving different kinds of problems. So we need to give ourselves that same discipline and creative minds love discipline in order to say, what's the problem and what's the solution? And time is one of those
Mm,
disciplines. And it really forces you to think about the challenge differently. So let's say you're getting ready, and I'm so guilty of this all the time. You get ready and you're 10 minutes early before you have to leave the house. And I can't tell you how often I go from 10 minutes early to 10 minutes late because then I start, like, fidgeting with something. I'm like, "Oh."
same. I'm never on time, but in my work life I am, but in my personal life I'm shocking. So
I can't do it because I gave myself, because I allowed that extra time to creep in. So there's that. There's just that, like, mental fidgeting and second guessing. Imagine if it's more than 10 minutes. Imagine you finish something and then you have, like, another week to look at it, or noodle with it or, so something you were happy with, all of a sudden you're
mm,
not happy with. And it's funny when creatives say they need more time, it's actually what usually happens is you're multitasking a lot of things and you're going to wait till the very last minute to do it anyway. So really early on in my career, I remember Joe and I were watching a focus group. We were behind the glass with our clients, and the moderator came back when she was done to the back room and she said, okay, so I'll get you this report she said to the client, okay, so I should be done with my reporting in about 2 weeks. And I remember thinking, like, what takes 2 weeks of what you have to do? Like, you sat through like, when you sit down and actually measure how many hours it would take her, it might take her 20 to 30 hours. but why is that spread across a 2-week period? So what's going to happen is she's going to do some other things and then come back and try to remember what happened in the report, what happened in the sessions, and capture the energy. Is if you reconfigure your schedule and your priorities to say, well, this week I'm only doing this.
Mm.
And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it and I'm going to focus on it and I'm going to maintain the energy and then I'm going to be done. Like then there's an endpoint too. So it gets you into, as you said, that flow state where it just becomes effortless and you can focus and move forward, but really thinking about time in a different way.
Yeah, it's so true. And I believe in that so much. I'm one of those people that gets frustrated, like when I hear that, like, we need 3 weeks or we need this or that. I'm like, really? How come you can't just block out your schedule, like you say, keep the momentum going? I'd love your thoughts on this too, in terms of you obviously do a lot of workshops and you've been doing them for a very long time. And I've done them for, I mean, I had a career spanning in advertising for 25 plus years. And, like I've sat through a lot of and moderated and done a lot of workshops myself. And I think right now, especially, there is so much opportunity to get so much more done in workshops. And you talked about creativity can come from anywhere, and I believe that too. In terms of, yes, an engineer is a create like that. Everyone, like anyone who's solving a problem is needs to have critical thinking, needs to be curious, needs to be creative. In terms of just the way they think about the problem, I quite often call it solution finding, because you are finding a solution. And when we say problem solving, it's generally problem solve, but like, actually, is that the solve? Like, you have to keep asking the
Right.
questions and digging into it, right? But I'm noticing in workshops in particular, like the more you can, from an express time, speed perspective, the more you can focus in the workshop, there's so much more you can achieve. Like I had a session with a client the other week and it was just like we had a 4-hour workshop and the output was huge because it wasn't just sitting there talking, it was actually talking, creating. Do you know what I mean? Like, we
You're
were co-creating, we were collaborating together, and I think back in the day, it used to be like, "Oh, no, 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 creative has to do that, it has to happen this way." All this structure and things like that around it. It's becoming more and more non-linear, and I think the more non-linear we can be, the more it can work faster as well.
Well, and it's you're preaching to the choir in terms of sessions. So some people will ask us to run like a 1 day or 2 day brainstorming extravaganza or an offsite. And we say, well, we never do anything that lasts more than 4 hours.
Mm,
Because if you're doing it right, you should get everything. The people can't keep their energy up all day.
no.
And so what happens is, like, it's just talking, it's, like, wasted you'll spend an hour. I mean, time is such a valuable commodity, and then you get a bunch of people in a room, everyone's spending their time, and the facilitator or a moderator will spend the first 30 to 45 minutes on an icebreaker.
Mm,
And it's like, you don't need an icebreaker. You don't need slinkies. You don't need these things to be creative. So we come in and we also do a lot of preparation before the session. So we come in with hypotheses, with strategies, these solutions that we want to find. And then we'll say to the room, okay, here's, as an example, we're looking for a new we're looking for a new cleaning product, and the cleaning product is going to use some kind of kitchen logic as an ingredient because we know people love food items and food things that end up in their dishwashing liquid. And so what's the food item? What does it do? And tell us about your product. And you have 45 seconds to think about it. And so already the deadline is set, the competition, we have rewards, but then we're guiding people in a direction, but you might think avocado, someone else might think lemon, someone else might think cucumber, someone else might say lemongrass for different reasons. And then as people are kind of blurting out their ideas and their answers, then you hear someone else's one, you go, oh, well, it could also be this. And it just sparks that conversation.
mm,
And we capture everything. And then we say, okay, great. Let's move on. So the other thing we never do in a workshop is get a group of people to try to get to consensus. So groups are great for building. They're great for talking. They're great for, when guided, building off of each other and making connections. But then if you ask those same people, okay, now of those ideas you created, which is your favorite? first, the idea isn't done yet because,
No.
there could have been like a spark of an idea that might lead us to something else. So we haven't had time to really flesh it out. And also, people are going to either pick their idea, their friend's idea. So,
Yeah.
like, or have some kind of bias. And that's not the purpose of brainstorm. Ideation is supposed to be broadening and not narrowing. And I think people forget about that. So even at the end of 3 or 4 hours, we have so many ideas. People are so tired. We're exhausted. And then we can say, okay, let's look at the output and let's look for patterns. Let's look for those aha moments. Let's look for an idea that the energy just shifted in the room as it happened. I mean, there was a whole brand, Wendy's, we were working with the Wendy's brand to come up with a new kind of brand name for their line of coffee. And one of the stimuli was like, let's look at independent coffee roasters and the way they're named. And let's see if we can use some of their language and anything Wendy's that could like give us a new brand name. And that was one of the moments someone said, Redhead Roasters. And we all went like, uh-huh, that's it, aha. And we knew that was a top contender the moment it happened. And so
Yeah.
there's always those moments of like, oh, I can point people in the direction, but it's so great to have everyone finding a solution, and it's in that solution finding that real magic
Yeah, I love
happens.
that. So good. I'm going to jump around a little bit now, and I want
Sure.
to again, you said pre-show round, you had a point of view on AI, and, then there's the culture piece as well, and culture is changing by the second in terms of there's so many things going on, and you would have seen a lot as well. I'd love your I'm very curious about you said you had this point of view on AI, but then what are you
Mhm.
seeing culturally as well that's I guess, rapidly changing and whether it's for the better or for the good. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but do you know what I mean? Like, what do you and then there too, but I think they kind of almost interconnect in a way as well because AI is influencing a lot culturally, and I think we've got some choices to be made as well. But then obviously there's other big
Mhm.
things that are influencing our cultures as well. So yeah, two big questions.
Well, so it's funny. So, again, starting my career, working quickly also has these benefits for the output, but now has been the time. And I walked away from talking about speed for a long time because people thought it would mean that I was skipping steps in the
Yes,
process.
yes.
But now I've really come back to it because now it's more important than ever,
Mm,
not only having greater output, but being able to keep up with what's going on. Now
mm,
for in advertising and communication, it can be a matter of responding to things very quickly. For new products and innovation, it's harder to produce things as quickly. But if you see a trend coming, being able to do something in 6 months and not 4 years, it was the kind of speed that can keep up with culture. And there's also like the initial culture, we call it signals from the future. So you can look to
I like
certain
that.
consumers in the US. Things usually start on the coasts and move inwards from trends. So you're trying to time it at the right point so that you can pick up on the signals and then offer things to people when more people are ready for what you're offering and what early adopters have already signaled people
Mm,
might want. So I think keeping up with that speed is good. And AI has become a tool that speeds everything up, and it's been funny to kind of ride the AI kind of roller coaster as a agency owner, as a user. I think the problem, so when AI first came, first people started really adopting it wide scale, I'd say about a year and a half, 2 years ago. No one wanted to ideate. People were like, well, why would I? Someone actually said to me, and I won't say who, they said, we're not gonna do this project with you, we're doing it with another agency because why would we limit our thinking to 12 people in a room or 20 people when we can have every idea possible? And so they went with a company that did all AI stuff, and so people thought that they didn't need to ideate anymore. So AI, people use it as a tool thinking it can be creative, and it's just not. It's
okay.
just not a creator. And it also it tricks you into thinking you're saving time, but then it keeps saying like, "Do you want me to do this? How about
Oh,
this? How
I
about
know.
this? What about this?"
I know.
And so you can get caught up in it. So not that I mean, we have AI tools, I use it all the time, but very selectively. very selectively and always with a guardrail of, like, not getting caught up in the endless loop of it, because what starts out as a time saver can end up being a time waster. Like, if you're gonna use it to write an email, by the time you put your email in and have it rewrite it and then edit it and copy and paste it and put it back in the email you're gonna send, like, just write your own email. Like, it doesn't really save you that much time.
No, it's
If
also
you're sending out a batch of emails, maybe that's
yeah,
different, but,
totally. Yeah. It's also cognitive
uh
overload, right? Like, here we are in this world full of just like there's so much to sift through full stop, and yet here we are, and it's just adding, adding, adding versus subtracting. Because I also think, like, when it comes to creativity, like, it's like we can, we go broad, but then there comes a point where it's just like, okay, what's not working? What's like, let's subtract it to get very clear on what it is. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, we're just overwhelmed, overloaded. It's yeah.
And I think that's the problem with AI when it comes to creativity. It's just like
Mm,
it's too much. It's
mm,
too much. It's just making, and it's also like retrospective. Like, you're on Friday, I'm on Thursday. It's only going to tell you what happened on Thursday. It's always in the past. It's
mm,
never really in the future. But again, in order to keep up, you have to use it. You can, it's great for like doing research on categories. What categories are growing? What categories are shrinking? Should I, use this format or, break through to another one? What are
mm,
the chances? We
mm,
we use AI testing that has digital twins of real people, so we can ask more questions to, based on someone's, again, digital twin. So based on the answers they've given, it allows us to do research more quickly. So
mm.
again, there's things that it speeds up. It's just a matter of knowing where and when to use it.
I've got so many more questions for you, but I'm already conscious how long we've been talking for. I've got I guess a couple more questions in terms of what are you seeing as what does the next generation of leadership look like for you in terms of what do you think that we need for a better planet, a better culture, a better society, all of that. Like there's and where I'm going with this is we're in this we've got this old world that some people are still holding on for dear life for. And yet there's this new world. And I think there's a lot of possibilities. And, we're at this kind of very pivotal time in terms of we can either stay where we are or we can, make the changes we need to make. And obviously, there's some pretty powerful people out there that, that's not easy, but things are starting to, kind of come unstuck. When it comes to
I sure hope
leadership
so.
broadly, yeah, what do you think the next generation of what the, new leadership needs to encompass?
Well, I think it's been interesting. I heard a fact the other day that like the next generation is going to be one of those generations that probably like people have always been historically, at least in the US, have been more successful than their parents. That was always the goal, was that every generation would, have more like economic success than their parents. And with this generation and the next generation, like that's not going to happen. So this focus on like prosperity is going to shift. And it's interesting because when I see like, I mean, I'm squarely in the Gen X, and so I've heard people, as millennials came up, everyone's complaining about millennials, and then Gen Z, and so Gen Alpha, and everyone's complaining about, how different the next generation is. But I'm actually super hopeful for the generation that's about to come up. And it's the one, and I see it through, I have a 17-year-old son, so I see it through him and his friends where they don't, I mean, they are rejecting AI in a lot of ways. They're rejecting the environmental aspects of it. They're thinking about human rights and civil rights in different ways. And
Mm.
again, he's a New York City kid, so he's exposed, differently than maybe everyone in the world. But I'm hoping that the next generation of leaders will have more of this purpose as part of their
Yes.
plan. And you see it coming up, like each generation is getting more purposeful. So if our generation was getting a little more accepting and then we've had somewhat of a backlash, I think there's hope. I'm hoping there will be another backlash of, or a forward lash, I guess, as it were, of purpose, where people are really they've given up this, I'm going to be wealthy, because that seems like less attainable and go to more like, I'm going to make a difference. And people do need to feel like change has to be like imminent and almost really affecting them in order to be motivated to do something about it. And I think
Mm.
this generation is seeing the changes in the environment. They're seeing the changes in the economic structure. They're seeing the changes in the political landscape and in, tech companies. And so that's my hope is that they'll be the ones that as we're getting closer to this tipping point, that they'll carry it on to
And I
make it
think I
better.
love that your call out around making a difference. I think that, I was talking to someone about this on the pod the other day. I've got books that were written back in the 1990s, the 80s, and one's called The Soul of the Firm, and then there's another one, Good Business, by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's the godfather of flow. And everything you're just talking about there, like making a difference and wealth, and I guess making a difference also equals happiness and purpose, right? They were talking about that was going to be like the future. And it's almost like for me, it's kind of bizarre because you read of those books that are like 20 years old, and then yet here we are. And it's like, yes, I do think that's the focus. But I also think that, prosperity follows, abundance follows when we're doing actually what we are here to do from a purpose perspective and here to make a difference versus just chasing a number. That's it. You just,
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
fulfilled.
I think that I mean, they have all these studies, with consumers where everyone says they want, like, to buy things that are purpose driven. You ask a consumer,
Yes.
do you want this if it's good for people or the planet? And they say yes, but then their
Not
behaviors
doing it.
belie that
Yeah.
because there's something else more in it for them. And that's where I think the shift is now that people are saying, hey, I don't know how much there is for me unless I do these more purpose, that's where I'm going to get something for
Yeah.
myself is in doing something that's better for the planet or better for others because this notion of prosperity and abundance feels sadly not available to
Mm,
everyone these days. So like
mm,
what's your choice? You may as well do something that either makes you happy, that follows your purpose, that yeah, that makes you feel good and
mm.
something that you feel good about, you may as well. Abundant positivity.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. It's fascinating, isn't it? Oh my goodness, so many more questions, but I am going to have to let you get back to your day. Brand it, you just quickly brand it yourself. You're the author of Brand It Yourself. Tell us a bit about your book.
That was a book written right at the beginning of my brand now experience. And it was trying to explain to people that, the mysticism of creativity, of creating a brand, creating a name, understanding a positioning. They weren't these mystic things that only like the super creative could do. This was something like, again, I was showing people ways to set up your goal, set up the problems, show people how to look for solutions and then encouraging ways to go about it to say, write down 10 names. Like if you want a new product name, don't just but think about different name structures, think about other names you like and how would you sound like them? Try on different voices. So these
Mm,
is a very practical demystification of creativity and branding and
I love it.
innovation. It was
Brand
fun to write.
personnel, like having your own personal brand is super important too, though, don't you think? Like, and I feel like there's a book you could write there in terms of just like, I think, and it goes back to even what we were just talking about then with, the younger generation. They're so much more, in some ways, comfortable in their own skin, but in other ways, they're not. But I'm a big believer in, obviously distinctive brand assets, full stop, from like a, product or, a brand as such. But I also think, brand it yourself. It's also what's your distinctive like brand, like personal brand assets as well that sets you apart. I think that's super important also. And that's completely a different conversation. But I
Well,
don't know.
well, I
Yeah.
don't know. We might have to have a point part two because now I want to ask you like what would you call your brand? Is that a fair? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I know. It's a good question. I have so many different people that have a point of view on what my brand is. What would I call my brand? I mean, my business is Be Formless because, like, coming back to even speed and things like that, I'm a shapeshifter. I can't sit still for too long. The minute I'm like, I have to transform things, I shape things, and then and I'm like that in my personal life as well, in terms of like, I'm a busy bee, like, as in not busy for the sake of being busy, but I have to buzz around, like it's energy. Like I've got all this energy that I have to use. But what would I call it? That is a good question
I'm
because
sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot because I don't even know if I have a real answer to that, and I probably should.
no, it's
Uh,
great because you've got me thinking. Because what's my distinctive brand assets? I know what they are. Like that we were talking before, they were like it's color, it's glasses, it's things like that. But oh, you've got me. Yeah, there's a book there in that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like in terms of what our own brand is, and because I think that it's so important to be able to be going right back to the start of the conversation. Not fitting in and being able to fit in and being able to be who you authentically are. And I think we're going to see more of that as well, because I think
mhm.
by being authentically who you are, that's when you can actually be fulfilled, be true to your purpose, and that's where you can truly make a difference.
And I think it's also interesting, and this is your point of like, does your brand come from within, from how you see yourself or how other people
Yeah.
see you? Which is what products and brands go through all the time is how
Yeah.
much is it our DNA versus how
Yeah.
much, do consumers or our audience, how they see us, and how do you find that middle ground? Because I
Yeah.
know how I see myself and how I'm perceived. There's probably a lot of difference, I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of overlap, but, we show our best sides to other people.
Agree.
They don't see some of the internal things that we
No,
all go
totally.
through.
No. But you know what, Lynn? One funny thing about that is some people will say, gosh, I thought you just come across like frenetic, this crazy, not frenetic's the wrong word, crazy. What did one client say to me once? She called me crazy something. And then realized very quickly, I'm very structured. I'm very like, okay, like I've got all this energy, but I'm like, you know, when it's on sort of thing.
Mhm.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like she was like, whoa,
Yeah.
she just, yeah. So I think sometimes it's good to be able to have that ability. But I think, yeah, you're right. It's that, oh my goodness, we could just keep talking and talking. Lynn, how do we find out more about you? We didn't even go into Portugal or anything else like that, but we'll have to have, I think we'll have a second a follow up pod because yeah, I think it would be great. But maybe later in the year, so, because this year is a horse year, fire horse. There's lots happening this year in particular, unlike
I
any
feel
other
it.
year. Yeah,
So our website is brandnow.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Lynn Altman. Definitely connect, follow, message. I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I love talking innovation and brand. And those are pretty much the two best places to find us.
amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Lynn. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It's been I said to you, did we catch up earlier this year or last year? Because we did have a quick catch up that we were going to, and you were off to Portugal, and I kind of remember what was going on with me at the time. And here we are. And yeah, it's been a real honor to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I've had a great time and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Take care.